does this thing work?
What are they doing?
Now, you can't calculate random coordinates.
So melodramatic.
Is it really that dangerous?
What do we have to say to convince you there's lots more?
Well, it can wait.
Yes, but I can't.
What can be in there that's worth so many lives?
Isn't it obvious?
Pull to open.
Pull to open.
Yes, and what do you do?
The storm it created must have lasted for months.
Which is exactly what we want.
I hope you're right.
Well, let's find out.
Explode the bomb.
Here come the drums!
Hello, and welcome to Pull to Open. It's the only Doctor Who podcast that has clearance to go back in time and smash right into the television program so that it's exploded all over the place. And really the only choice is to explore the show in a most excellent random order. I'm Pete Paschal.
Excellent. And I am Chris Taylor. And yes, we have actually smashed into your past and exploded all over the place. We're in your past, we're in your future, we're currently in your ears, in the present. And we're very, very interested in time, as are a lot of creatures. And but you know what? Some creatures, Pete, they're more emotional than others.
Well, it depends if those creatures are great or small, I think.
Hey.
But yeah, the creatures are interested in time. They're interested in feeling things about time. Honestly, I've been told that for many people, small, beautiful events are what life is all about. You know what I'm talking about, Chris, right?
That's right.
You know, watching a sunset is a good example.
Yeah.
Smelling a flower.
Yeah.
Yep.
Well-prepared meal.
Those are good to eat, I hear. The well-prepared meals.
Not a badly prepared meal. Do not enjoy a badly prepared meal. PSA from Pull to Open. But yes, a small...
I want to add to that list, though. I want to add something to the list. And then one of the best things about being human is listening to an insightful and entertaining podcast. I'm just going to throw that in there in that list. What could be better? What could be more human?
You just read my mind, sir. I was going to say more specifically that listening to Pull to Open is a small, beautiful event. And for you, dear listener, right now, that's what your life is all about.
And honestly, really specific episodes of Pull to Open. And let me go over those right now, because previously on Pull to Open, we've been on this random journey for a while. We've been doing lots of different episodes. I'm going to take you way back for a second. Eons ago, it seems like, we did a little story called Time Flight, which was a part of season 19. There was some...
end of, indeed. Yes.
Yeah. And there was talking about the previous story a little bit in that one. And they dealt with something, shall we say. Now, before I get into that, a little after Time Flight, we did an episode called Black Orchid, which was actually 2 stories previous to Time Flight.
That's right. So, featuring Adric and some dancing and a buffet.
Yeah. So really, we've kind of got 2 pieces of bread in a sandwich here, I would say. And there's something missing when you only have the bread, because if you're just eating bread, you got to have something in the middle. You got to have the key ingredient of the sandwich. All right. So
for a well-prepared meal.
For a well-prepared meal.
Yeah.
And so in recent days, we've spun around a few other places. 3 stories ago, we were at Planet of the Ood, a Tennant story, which was very, very chilly because it was a cold planet. And then it got even chillier in the next adventure, not so much in terms of cold, but in terms of horror and suspense. And it was indeed very horrible at the horror of Fang Rock.
Yes, indeed.
And then we jumped forward, got into a little bit of a timey-wimey adventure, and we're back in New Who, but early New Who, in a story called Father's Day.
Yes, in which it was revealed that for the human race to survive, one man had to die.
Sacrifice was very much the order of the day in that one. And so the randomizer, apparently taking all this into account, in its wisdom, selected for our next story, Season 19, Serial 6, Earthshock.
Yes, and we should also say, I don't think you mentioned Fort of Doomsday that we did in this same season fairly recently, and it's fair to say that we had a fun time. Well, you had a less fun time than that. I had an absolute ball watching Fort of Doomsday. It's one of my favorite zombies ever. We'll get to our rating system, but one of my favorite so bad it's good Doctor Who's now is Fort of Doomsday, and I've many happy memories of that. Earthshock.
Wow, I'm really glad like season 19's elevated in your head a little bit as we get into this one. But yeah, now we're in
Earthshock.
Earthshock. We've got
the polar opposite of that. I mean, as you may notice, I'm wearing my black tie today. If you're watching on Spotify or YouTube, like there is something to mourn here. There is a mournful atmosphere to this particular story. Yes, you could say that. You could also say that just this once, Adric, somebody dies.
Guess
no
who?
No spoilers if you haven't seen this. What is it now? 40-year old production, but yeah, somebody dies.
Well, we might get into some spoilers pretty quickly, but certainly before the TLDW if you've never seen Earthshock. But what are you doing listening to this podcast if you've never seen Earthshock? So we're going to get into all of it, guys. We're going to get into sinking our teeth into the metallic center of this sandwich, this Davison sandwich, very, very soon. But first, before we do that, it is time to hurtle something directly at Chris Taylor's brain to the point where millions upon millions of tons of neurons are blown up and thrown up into the atmosphere of his head.
Oh my God. Wow. What a metaphor. I mean, I was going to do a version of that, but my goodness.
Yeah, it's time for the Whomoji Challenge.
Oh boy.
Yep.
I can't just throw a few levers and send the Whomoji Challenge back 65 million years ago?
You know, we haven't tried furious button pushing in this segment yet, so maybe it could work, because that does tend to work on the show. But no, right now, we're going to be doing the part of the show where I get to torture you by describing emojis that correspond to a title of a Doctor Who story. And you have to guess that title, sir. Are you ready?
I'm grieving the loss of someone who we will soon be discussing. So that is my excuse if I don't do well on this one. It's grief, Bryn.
All right, totally get you. All right, but here we go. This one's not too long. It's 6 emojis, so about a mid-size for the Whomoji Challenge.
Okay,
and that's it. That's all you get to know going into this. So
that's right. And then I have to calculate the square root of those emojis, right?
Yeah, that's always part of the challenge. Yeah. I cut it out every time, though. All right, first emoji, a beetle.
Okay.
Second emoji, the rings planet.
Okay.
Third emoji, a factory worker, a male factory worker. He is African American or of African descent.
Okay.
There is another factory worker, another male factory worker. He is Caucasian with a mustache.
Okay.
They're getting really detailed in the variations of these emojis, I must say.
Yeah.
There is the fifth emoji is a satellite dish.
Okay.
Sixth emoji, a butterfly.
Oh my God.
Now I'm going to throw all that in the chat so you can have a quick look at what that looks like.
That has just completely thrown me off course. I feel like a Cyberman has just destroyed my Whomoji machine, and I will never know if I was right because I have no clue. The appearance of a beetle made me think Beatles. I was like, okay, this is either The Chase or Devil's Cord, but I'm guessing it's not either.
It is neither of those adventures. No.
The ringed planet. I always get Rings of Arcton.
It's not Rings of Octon.
And then the butterfly, because I was already in the headspace of Devil's Cord, I was thinking of the butterfly and Space Babies. It's not that. I mean, wow. Yeah. So the two policemen, I feel like that should be...
factory workers. But I guess they could be policemen. Anyway. But the quick hint is the first and the last emoji are very related.
Oh, it's one of those where they sort of where they change. Oh, it's the mutants.
It's the mutants. Nice.
Yes. Wow.
There we go. Had to do a bit of a callback there. You get to the sixth emoji. Wait, where's the first emoji callback? Boom.
I like that.
provided it.
Yes, I remember that they evolve into butterflies, and how could I forget? Now, if there'd been like a rainbow and a butterfly, I would have been, oh yeah,
Right.
clearly.
You need a Technicolor butterfly. That would have really done it. So that's maybe that's in the next emoji update. It's the 2026 one.
Yes, the mutants go to listen to our podcast on that pertwee joint and listen to how it got really, really 70s with it and was very colorful and beautiful and interesting and ends with butterflies.
Yeah. Butterflies, in weird robes. I don't know. I think there were supposed to be wings, but it ended up looking fine. It's fine.
Yeah.
It's a great show. So that comes to us from JC17Ace, who submitted those over on Patreon. By the way, patreon.com/boltopen if you want to check that out. Again, the best place to give us Whomojis is always in the Apple Podcast reviews or what reviews section of whatever podcast service you happen to be using. Those Whomojis will always go to the front of the line. You will be next in the queue. But you can also shout them to us on Patreon or on social media or wherever you find Pull to Open. And we're usually Pull to Open or Pull to Open 63 on most networks. So Google it.
Yes. And on the network of Spotify, if you're watching us there, pull from the bottom of the screen. Don't pull too far, you'll close the app, but pull just slightly from the bottom of the screen. That's right. You will find down there, Poll to Open, where we have ratings for every single story. You can rate Earthshock right now, if you so wish. Or you can go back to any of our other podcasts which have polls still open. The polls stay open for literally as long as we could manage. I think 65 million years is the count on most of them, or 1,700 and something days, whichever comes first. But we have some ratings now for Planet of the Ood. That's Dr. Donna story.
Gotta say, these ratings are a little ood.
Not
quite sure.
You said this was just a straight up Dalek. I said it had a little bit of Professor Hater in it. Going back to Time Flight, that's where Professor Hater comes in. He's about to enter the scene in our Earthshock scenario. But I said it was half and half, and there's a bit of that sort of level of schizophrenia in these ratings. So. So 50% agree with you that it's a Dalek, but the rest are divided between the Viscount Banger and the Professor Hater. So
interesting.
Yeah.
A
quarter of our audience thinks that this is one of the best of the best Planet of the Ood.
Yeah, I'm a little interested. No, there were virtually none in any of the other categories. So it's either they're like really good or they tried something, and I'm a little surprised some people thought it was as a banger. I definitely don't get banger vibes from it. So I would just actually like to take this opportunity to ask folks to explain your ratings and comments, because you can do that on Spotify now. I'd be curious why someone thinks this is a banger, and sort of racking my brain a bit. I think, well, it is a pretty good Donna episode. There are a very limited number of Dr. Donna episodes, and this sort of kicks off that whole arc. So that's pretty good. And there are good moments with the Ood song, so when they're sort of listening to each other and the telepathy there, so that's all right.
I tell you what, you could explain your Viscount Banger rating for Planet of the Ood by also putting what you'd like about it in emoji.
Ooh.
We haven't done that one yet for the Whomoji challenge. Look at that. I've just let you do two things at once. 2 birds, 1 stone. You're welcome.
Package that all into review. It's going right in the next podcast, folks.
Yep.
Amazing.
Absolutely. And we'll love you forever.
Sweet. Well, folks, I already told you how to follow us on social. What I haven't told you all on YouTube is a special thing that you can do is become a true companion of the podcast. Yes, that's right. A true companion. You get all the points necessary to run along with us in our TARDIS, and you will get access to special emojis on YouTube. You will get forever our gratitude. And even if you could actually the opportunity to donate at an even higher level for us to join us on one of our commentaries. That's the Viscount level, of course.
True companions, of course, are the ones who are protected from any dangerous things that might happen outside our TARDIS, and you'll certainly not be left behind. We will make sure that you don't get distracted by any shiny logic problems out there.
Yeah, big silver figures standing near our TARDIS notwithstanding. So See if you can do that. And if not, if that's YouTube's not your bag, but you like your Spotify, there are ways to donate on Spotify. Just scroll to the bottom of the show notes in this episode. There's a link. You can donate any amount you want to ensure that you get the Pull to Open episodes you want coming at you continually in the future, assuming there is a future.
Yes, or in the past, if there isn't.
All right. Well, now it is time to get to it, and I'm excited to get to this for many
time
reasons.
To just plunge straight into our commentary without updating the listeners or reminding the listeners what the story was. I'm sorry if you were looking for some sort of brief summary of the story we're going to talk about, like in some sort of limited amount of time. We don't do that. What are you talking about? Like, it must be some other Doctor Who podcast you're thinking of, right, Pete?
Chris, I have one thing to say to you, and it is summarize at once.
Oh my God!
We must
reveal.
Summarize. Oh, my voice cracking with emotion. I want this. I want this summary so bad. No, of course it is. Before we get into any talk of this particular story, we need to summarize the story. We need to update people on what happened, but only the relevant bits that can fit into 2 minutes, because this is a 4-episode adventure of the classic series, and we only allot 30 seconds per classic adventure for these summaries. Yes, that's right. It's TLDW. It's time for Too Long Didn't Watch. Too Long Doctor Who.
Or Too Long Ago Doctor Who. Too long ago.
What is it, 38 years at this point? Something like that?
Yeah.
Maybe, no, 40-something years. It was 82, right? 43 years.
Thank you for making me feel old. I did watch Earthshock at the time.
Dude.
Yeah, I mean, I was young. I didn't fully understand what was going on. I didn't realize that when I watched it when I was old, I would also not necessarily understand everything that was going on.
Well, different things, though, right?
Yeah. I mean, when you're young and you're watching Doctor Who that doesn't make sense, you're like, oh, well, it must be just me. It must be me. I must not fully understand this. I'm just clearly not a math genius or a plot genius like Adric. And then you watch it when you're older, you're like, that doesn't make what? Okay.
But make it make sense. Please make it make sense in just 2 minutes. Are you ready, sir?
Okay.
I don't care if you're ready.
I've got to be emotionless here. I've got to be completely emotion-free. Okay.
All right, let's do this emotionless summary of Earthshock, the complete Pull to Open summary of it in 4, 3, 2, 1, go.
So there's this expedition on Earth in the future, and they're in the caves, and they've lost members of their patrol, and the security people are coming in. And then the Doctor and Adric and Nissa and Tegan have landed there, and Adric's all upset because he wants to go back to his home in E-Space, and he starts the calculations. The Doctor has an argument with him. They step outside, and there are these androids. That's what has killed members of the expedition, and they're defending this bomb. And the bomb is being controlled from space somehow. It's getting through all the cave system in
30
here.
seconds.
So the Doctor takes everyone he disarms the bomb and manages to take everyone to where the signal from the bomb is being sent, which is this freighter that is heading towards Earth, where there's this massive galactic peace conference going on. And what's on the freighter? It appears to be Cybermen, even though the Doctor and Adric are taken as they've been murdering these people who've been going missing on the freighter. It's actually the Cybermen.
1 minute.
They are there. They take over the ship. One of the crew members is a traitor and helps the Cybermen take over the ship. But the ship is going to crash into Earth during this peace conference, so that they can't unite against the cyber people. So they sort of mess up the freighter, and the Doctor and companions manage to leave. But Adric is stuck there with the crew, and he has to solve these logic problems to try to stop the ship from crashing into the Earth.
Minute 30.
It goes back in time. The ship is going back in time now. It's going back 65 million years with the TARDIS following it. The cyber people on board, they use Adric's gold badge and the guns to destroy the Cybermen on the TARDIS, but the ship plunges into the prehistoric past of Earth 65 million years ago, becomes the asteroid that destroyed the dinosaurs, and Adric dies on the ship. never knowing if you would get the final logic problem because the Cybermen destroyed the machine. And
time.
And
that's it.
Silence. Yes.
Shh. Can't talk.
Yes.
Respect
Exactly.
there.
Minute silence, because of course, right at the end, and I'd actually forgotten this from watching it at the time, that it is the only time, correct, where there is no music at the end of Doctor Who.
I think so. Yeah. I mean, I forget. Does Sleep No More have music? I can't remember. That's the only sort of weird creative. Not the only one, but there might have been another time. I remember in Demons in the Punjab, they just sort of changed the music, so that was still music. It was just different music. So
well,
yeah,
you know what that means, because I don't know if you remember, like I do, and who could forget our podcast on the gunfighters.
Oh, who could?
Where they had that song called The Last Chance Saloon, and then it just keeps appearing throughout the show. Like when anyone dies in the gunfighters, you get this mournful verse of The Last Chance Saloon. And I said at the time, and actually came up with the first few lines of it, they should just keep this going throughout Doctor Who history. They should just have another verse and another verse and another verse. And the one that I plucked out of my head was about Adric.
Oh, would you like to
yes.
hum a few bars here?
Yeah,
I think you can do it.
I
You're just going to give us the lyrics?
first lines, but I've filled it in now in honor and respect of Adric. So the structure goes like it's farewell to Adric as he tumbles to the earth, far away from space and the world of his birth. He could have danced with Nyssa, but the end came up too soon. Now he's eating all the buffet at the Last Chance Saloon.
Nice. Very cool. That was awesome. Wow, my daughter is going to love that. So she always liked Adric, partly because he was so unabashedly hungry all the time. He had a huge appetite.
Yes, and we did talk about this at the Black Orchid podcast. He does go to that buffet. He does dance with Nyssa a little bit. I obviously in the song meant dancing in the Stephen Moffat sense.
Yes.
But yeah, he just didn't get a chance. But yeah, so we knew we've seen the before, we've seen the after, and of course we all know that Adric's tenure on the TARDIS was not the greatest, not the smoothest. Didn't always get on with his co-stars the best, and they couldn't quite get what the character was supposed to be for. So he killed him off.
Well, and by killing him off in the same way that Obi-Wan became more powerful than ever, he in turn turns Adric into not just a forgettable sort of companion, but like one of the most memorable companions now, and is cited often in other media and even the show itself. It's like obviously one of the only really dramatic deaths. I mean, like we talked about this before when we were talking about Face the Raven, where they had killed companions way back in the Hartnell era, but it was like the Daleks' master plan, and that episode's missing. And so no one really remembers it.
Yeah, Katarina. If you're keeping score, it's Katarina and Sarah Kingdom.
Right. And there's even some debate on whether or not they're even companions. And go check our podcast on what it counts as a true companion if you want to get in on that debate. But this super dramatic ending of killing him off has just really elevated him. And they got brought up. There was the giggle. That was this story where he's freshly regenerated or bigenerated, and Gatwa's doctor is talking about they're loving Sarah Jane and all these. They name check a few companions, and Adric is one of the ones they name check because he obviously still carries that guilt with him that he couldn't save Adric.
Guilt that is pretty quickly buried in time flight. Which makes sense.
And the whole thing, to zoom out, and we'll zoom out and zoom in all over the place, but the idea that they really kind of knew they had something here. And I got to say, we make fun of JNT here and there, and he had certainly had his share, his tastes and whatever you think of them, but he had really good instincts about Earthshock. When they had decided to bring the Cybermen back after 7 years, he got super, super paranoid about it getting out. He wanted it to be a surprise. And it was like basically you couldn't even peek into Television Center. I guess they had this sort of observation thing. You could watch Doctor Who being shot if you were kind of walking by. He made sure all those windows were covered up. He turned down a Radio Times cover because he didn't want it spoiled. He made sure like the credits in Radio Times did not say cyber anything. And it became this massive moment. The reveal at the end of episode 1, where the Cybermen are essentially unmasked, just became this legendary thing. And I somehow I know that and felt that, even though I've watched this episode about 2 years later. I watched it in 1984, and I really have to, like, I can't tell you how much this story meant to me in terms of cementing myself as a Doctor Who fan. Because I guess, I was already becoming a fan. I'd already sort of seen the later Davisons and had come back around and had seen some Pertwee and some Tom Baker. And then Earthshock came around in the rotation on PBS that I was watching. And I hadn't seen the whole thing. I hadn't seen any of it before, actually. And, episode 1 happens, and that reveal to Cybermen was just so huge for me. It's just like, whoa, because I'd seen the Cybermen in Revenge, and, they're kind of almost like even more mythical because those earlier episodes are now missing, right? Like you only heard about them, and they were even more missing than today because obviously, even though some of them have been reconstructed today, you have streaming and everything's on demand. Back then, a lot of people didn't even have VCRs.
Yeah.
It was just like, oh, the Cybermen were just this cool thing you heard about and read about in Doctor Who storybooks or monster books. And that was just massive. And then just, I was just so gravitated for the rest of the episode. And then they tee up the Adric thing. And it's just like, what? You're just like there in stunned silence. And, obviously that's a big reason why they did the credits that way. Reason
which
they
was
did the credits that way,
also, they JNT was taking a cue from Coronation Street, the longest running soap in British history.
So Earthshock is kind of considered a classic for a lot of reasons, but for those main reasons. And I think the gravity of those things kind of it distracts you, at least on first watch, from like just how much the story like is thrown together with like duct tape and coat hangers and stuff. And, a lot of things kind of don't make sense, and you kind of need to headcanon. We can go over a lot of the sort of plot stuff. Like there's a lot of like plot holes.
But before we move away from what you're talking about, like the mood of it, like I do, like I often make Star Wars analogies. Obviously, I'm a Star Wars author. I connect this, but also like this was just a few years after Empire Strikes Back, right? And there are a few Empire Strikes Back vibes about this. One being the Cyberman that sort of trapped almost like Han Solo in carbonite in the door on the freighter towards the end.
That was a really cool effect, by the way.
Great effect. Really,
kind of unexpected
really.
Too.
And it's hard not to look at that now and think Han Solo. So good job there. But Adric, the whole Adric thing is kind of like the equivalent of the "I am your father" reveal. It's almost like Adric is saying, "I am your asteroid." Like it really like
right.
A generation of kids growing up, watch that, and it kind of grew up fast in that moment, right? It's because there is, unlike any of the companions, that we'd seen at that point before or since. Like there was no coming back. With Clara, it was kind of retconned a little bit, but no coming back from this one.
And then just on a meta level, I think it's very healthy for the show that they killed off a companion. Honestly, because you're constantly doing this. We're in danger all the time. It's super high stakes. It's just the premise of the show. But if no one ever dies, you're kind of like, okay, but. Now is it really, can you really feel it? And then finally with Adric, it's kind of like, oh yeah, you know what? Someone can die. It can happen. And we did it. And so it sort of raises the stakes like throughout. And I just want to say, like, a big picture level, like I watching this again, I didn't know how it was going to land on me. The execution is brilliant. Like we'll talk a lot about how this was sort of like Aliens before there was Aliens, right? It came before that version of the Alien franchise, but just after the original Alien, which doesn't look like this. Although you definitely feel like some of the Alien story is in this, right? Like essentially the sort of truckers in space.
Yeah.
aspect to it that these people are looking for their bonus and they're sort of hapless victims of an alien threat, although it just happens to be the Cybermen. So there's elements of it.
There's elements of that, but what I want to say overall, big picture, my concern here is that like I can sort of see this as in some ways the original sin of 80s Doctor Who, because it went down so well, and because the execution was so good, the directing was great, that I think I worry that the lesson that JNT learned from this was, you need a bit of stunt casting, you need sort of, gunfights, you need action, and you don't need to care too much about the script. And you don't need to make this script accessible, because it is like, whatever you think of the script, it's fair to say there are only a few like jokes in this. Like there's a lot of technical talk, right? So if you take that's the lesson, that's all you need to do, and it's all in the execution, then that may have been the wrong lesson for 80s Doctor Who to take, and it may have sort of led to its demise.
It's possible. Yeah, I kind of see what you mean. And I think the cast, to a large extent, carries a lot of that. Like, in other words, there's a lot of making stakes out of words, right? And it's all in sort of performances, notably, obviously, from Davison, from Janet Fielding. Like, we can talk a bit about the guest cast. And Beryl Reid, who plays the freighter captain, and was apparently, like, I didn't know, obviously not growing up in Britain, I had no idea who she was. Always thought she was a little weird to be this, I don't know, this short kind of, just a weird choice for a starship captain. She has the big ginger hair and it's all like, okay, I guess. And she has that crazy leather coat. She's clearly
channeling Margaret Thatcher. I mean, that's what we saw at the time. Beryl Reid trying to do Margaret Thatcher, but she's a comedy actress, and she's kind of fundamentally nice. Like, she does sort of misanthropic pretty well, but like, she's not really cut from the same cloth as Thatcher.
I sort of initially thought she was miscast. I still think she probably is miscast, but at the same time, because you have this great performer. Like, she's very memorable. Like, her lines and the sort of emotion that she shows, like being either annoyed at Ringway or being suspicious of the Doctor and then sort of coming around and being friends, all that sort of works a little better with someone with that temperament, I think. So I'd much rather have Beryl Reid than someone who was just, monotonish or just sort of phoned it in. So it makes it a little bit interesting, but
it is interesting, and she does get to deliver that line where the script is sort of so fed up with itself that it's criticizing itself. Where she's, the guy says he's apprehended some why did
you just say cult?
Yeah, it's so dramatic. I'm like, well, first of all, now apprehended, it really isn't that dramatic a word. But secondly, like, that's maybe in a more confident script, you could see Moffat doing that, but you'd have to sort of rely on the rest of the script kind of not being that sort of linguistically clunky. But like this one is kind of linguistically clunky all over the place. A lot of it in what the Cybermen say, like I think there's one point where the Cyber leader says something about emotional feelings. Like, what are there other kinds of feelings? Like, what are we talking about here? Like, and how?
Well, you could argue, I guess, feelings like touching things is feeling things. I guess I could stretch it. There's a lot of things you could stretch, but again, I think there's a temptation to nitpick this story because there's a lot of things to nitpick about it. But I also think the reason we nitpick it is because it is so successful, that the things it gets right really, really work. Like, they clearly set out to do a movie. They spent a boatload of cash on this one. It's so obvious. Like, just that bit where the Cybermen come in on the bridge and they're finally marching in. It's like the reverse of a clown car. Like, one after another, after another, after another. And you get like, wow, do they have like a dozen costumes? And they all look great.
Yeah.
Like, holy crap. And then the cyber leader comes in and it's like the director's clearly paying attention. Like, a lot of the Cybermen shots, once you sort of watch it with this eye, like are shot from a little bit below like the eye line, right? Just to give them a more towering appearance. And like it's just perfectly choreographed how all the Cybermen kind of get out of the way. And he just kind of like triumphantly marches in. And of course, then he has that line, which you either love or hate, of the old classic, so we meet again, Doctor. Like it's literally like doing the thing. Like, oh wow, okay, this is what we're doing. But it's kind of like it works. It's kind of like the archetypical line of what a Cyberman would say. Like for Doctor Who. Like,
yeah,
would we hate it if it was Troughton? Would we hate it if it was Hartnell? Like, I mean, I wouldn't. And I think it's okay to give that. It's appropriate for this epic kind of action story they're doing.
Yeah, I mean, I do want to give props to the cyber costumes here. Like, it became the norm going forward to have, the cyber costume with all these pipes all over it, which I believe was like an army. It was like army gear that they'd sprayed silver.
More like a flight suit.
Like a flight suit.
So that's kind of what it is. They have the flight suit, and then they put some wires all over it, which is always a bit tiresome. Again, I like the look. I like the idea. They're trying to remind you in a lot of different ways that the Cybermen were once human and are still. Like, they have biological parts. And we can talk about that. Like, the chin was the big thing they decided.
So visually speaking, you're absolutely, I wanted to, also compliment the story on that. You're absolutely right. The number of Cybermen matters. And again, to take the Star Wars analogy, just like the number of stormtroopers matters, right? You need a large number of them in one space. I mean, but the number of suits that they had here is impressive for Doctor Who. You're so used to it, watching through old classic Who, and you're like, there are really only 3 moving Daleks in the scene, aren't there?
Yeah.
But this is, you feel the scale of it, even though it's kind of, the script is denigrating itself. It's like the cyber leader's personal command. It's just a small force.
Until he activates the entire thing. Because they do say there's like 15,000 Cybermen on board. At least that's what they allude to with the silos. And then they activates, I guess not all of them, but a lot of them. And then they do sort of that crude mirror effect at the end of episode 3 to kind of make it look like there's more Cybermen than there are.
Which kind of works. You feel it. I mean, the pacing of it is brilliant. This really needs the Doctor Who equivalent of the Oscar for Best Director here, because like there's something about it that you can't zombie your way through this, right? There are definitely moments where you're like, haha, that was a silly line, or making fun of something or other. But there are also moments where even the most casual Who fan watches this and just shuts up. Right, because of the pacing of it, so that's all the direction. It's really well done. And while we're complimenting Earthshock, I want to get this out of the way early on. Really, kudos for bringing in the asteroid impact theory for what killed the dinosaurs, because that was fairly recent. So the first, it started to emerge as an idea in the late 70s that because there was all this iridium around the world, was what it was, this radioactive element, it was suggested of an impact. Iridium doesn't really naturally occur on Earth; it comes from asteroids, so there must have been an impact. Now, the first major cross-disciplinary meeting presenting papers on the whole theory was in 1981. Just when this was being written. So kudos to Eric Saywood for staying on top of the latest science, for kind of the early scene where the Doctor explains the death of the dinosaurs to Nyssa and Tegan. First of all, it's not like, some Doctor Who plot points are like, blinking lights saying, pay attention to this is going to be important at the end. He managed to do that without doing too much of that. But also it's really kind of the quintessential scene of how you present new science in Doctor Who. It's just very well done, very well written. So I don't want to critique the entire script.
Well, we talked about this before, still keeping to that original mandate of Doctor Who as education.
Yeah.
And like you say, I think it's so throwaway in a way. It's almost like they throw it in like, oh wow, this is really for kids, isn't it? You're almost kind of the eyebrow, and you don't see it coming when it comes back at the end, because they just sort of forget about it, and it's all a space adventure, and that was just some footnote about dinosaurs, and then it's like, oh, like it actually, like, it's one of those twists that works, and you think back, it was foreshadowed. Wow, okay, not bad there, Eric. Good. Good book ending.
Yeah, so that's good. So let's get back to the Cybermen. I know that you're a big Cybermen fan. You probably want to.
Well, this is the story that made me a Cybermen fan, right? I think for a lot of people. I mean, this is because of this story, the Cybermen became my favorite monsters. And they are obviously look fantastic in this. I think the 80s redesign of the Cybermen is just really inspired, and they put some tubes on and some more wires, and it's like, okay, that's always a bit silly from a story perspective, because it's almost like putting in more weak spots for your creatures. But I do think bringing back that element of, oh, they're people, right? And it didn't work technically in this one with the chins, because I think it's just a bit
Yes, the silver chins appear. Yes,
fairly new-ish viewer of Doctor, not that new, but I was a little confused, seeing the thing, like, was that a mistake? I thought, like, did they forget to spray paint that part of the costume? And I think it was put in to satisfy people who had grown up with Doctor Who and would get it. But as someone who hadn't at that, I was kind of like, that's a little weird. But otherwise, the costume is perfect. And I think they sort of corrected that in the sort of later stories, like the Five Doctors and Silver Nemesis and stuff. It wasn't quite as chinny. But the Cybermen here, they're redesigned. I won't spend too much time on my whole thing on like why they look different, and are we supposed to know that? It's like you can go check TikTok videos on that.
Yes, they have been redesigned, and so have their consoles. And I do think that OSHA, should that even still exist as a government agency by the time you're listening to this, needs to go in and look at the way they set up their workplace here, because they have, when the cyber leader and the underling who he is constantly bitching out are at the start, they're at this weird console that has these sort of kind of gun-shaped things pointing at the center of it that we'll get to what that produces in the hologram in a minute, but like, it is so low that at one point that you could see a Cyberman kind of having to reach down to press a button on it.
Right.
And you're like, oh, come on, like, you're going to give that Cyberman a bad back. Like, what is the deal with this? And there is an unfortunate script choice, and again, not Eric Saywood's fault. He did not know The Simpsons was going to come along. He'd never heard the words Mr. Burns, but the cyber leader keeps saying, excellent. And it is just impossible to watch that now.
Here, let me just say this, though. It is still the Cybermen's best catchphrase to date, because destroy is too generic. Delete, kind of like, I like delete, and we'll get to Rise of the Cybermen when we get to it, but I also understand why it didn't catch on. Excellent kind of works, and I think it works a lot because of David Banks and the choices that he makes alongside the director and the writer. So let's talk about that for a bit. So, the design's great, but I think what really makes this story memorable is Banks's performance, and particularly when he has a lot of back and forth with the Doctor in episodes 3 and 4. So notably, Banks's performance, as has been said many times, is kind of emotional, right? Like, he's got sort of some feeling behind him. I mean, honestly, there have been lists made of, what emotions he shows. I know he shows irritation at, you mentioned his lieutenant. And the lieutenant's kind of dumb, right? Like, I mean, there's like that bit where, is the second android fitted with visual monitoring? Yes. Then activate, like, it's really like a Spaceballs moment. Like, dude, what are we doing here?
Yeah. There's also, by the way, a point. Okay, I'll get this one out of the way. I think the cyber leader has just been introduced to the very concept of time as a thing. That some things happen sooner than later, because he's obsessed with time. All his dialogue is about time. Here's what he says:
right.
Destroy them at once. Okay. Chill, sir. They must be stopped immediately. Oh, really? I thought maybe next Tuesday. We must act quickly. No, I thought we must act slowly. They are too late. Okay. How much longer before activation? Dude, get a watch. Why are you asking your underling how long there is before activation? And then the time draws near. Like, he's suddenly existing in time for the first time.
Interesting. Maybe this is foreshadowing the Cybermasters when they would become Time Lords.
Yes. Did we talk before about I feel like somewhere in the masses of headcanon that we've done on this podcast, we talked about the idea that there was a time war between the Time Lords and the Cybermen. I think this was actually in the Revenge of the Cybermen, because we were trying to explain how the Vogons, with the planet of gold that the Cybermen trying to destroy.
Vogons is Hitchhiker's Guide.
Thank you. I always wondered what the difference was. Yes, there we go. Vogons. They use the seal of Rassilon, right? Because it was actually used from that serial for Deadly Assassin.
They liked it so much.
But we came up with this headcanon that that there had actually been a time war between the Cybermen and the Time Lords, and the Time Lords had actually managed to stop it, so it never happened in the first place. And this was
exactly
leaving their signature, right? But I think maybe also the cyber leader constantly talking about time is like he's trying to tell himself there's something he's missing here.
Yeah, I like that whole idea of there was this time war with the Cybermen, but the Cybermen definitively lost.
Yeah.
Right. And so now they're sort of not quite erased, but they're much less powerful than they would have been. I think that was kind of the gist of it.
Yeah.
And I think maybe this idea that the cyber leader is a bit emotional, like one, I think it works even if it's kind of inconsistent with the premise of the monster. Because really, think about it. How interesting is it for the Doctor to talk to a computer? What other cyber person performance has there been in Doctor Who that is as memorable, right? So it cheats a bit. I do like that they have sort of retreated a bit from it, because I think they found more interesting things to do with sort of the Cybermen as a concept here and there, at least in New Who. But in this one, like it just somehow he and Davison at the end there, I love all that sort of dialogue where the cyber leader, and it's mostly because Davison's helpless. He's totally in the cyber leader's power, and he's trying to verbally one up him here and there, and the cyber leader's not having it. Like the cyber leader just keeps like, okay, you want to show that you're smarter than me? I'm just going to kill your companion now and show you that I have control over you. And he just keeps doing things like that. He activates his army. It forces Adric to stay on the bridge, just really to annoy the Doctor. Really, like there's no other reason. Like we're just going to leave him here because you want him to come. It's like that. It's that thing.
I do enjoy that they've got the Doctor basically trying to downplay the importance of his companions. Right? Oh, I just need Adric to fly the TARDIS with me. Like he's trying not to give away his own emotional response. So I like that bit. But by the way, somehow the cyber leader knows that the TARDIS only takes one person to fly it.
He seems to know a lot about the Doctor and the TARDIS, right? From his files there.
Yeah, and let's talk about the files. This might be a good time to talk about them.
Yeah,
this came from Legopolis, which we've done, was what basically had a clip show in it at the end. Right. Like moments of all of the Doctor's villains coming past, and
it was like 2-second clips of people saying "Doctor,"
or "Doctor," which is how you know they're a villain. And JNT was like, "This is brilliant." There was a good reaction to that. Let's give the Cybermen their own clip show. So it turns out that the Cybermen have been recording Doctor Who on VHS. And,
pretty much.
They're watching the old tapes here on red hologram. It's like Blu-ray, but it's red.
Yeah, and they peel out a little bit of the 10th planet. I actually forget where the Troughton one's from. It might be like Wheel in Space.
Yes, it is.
And then Revenge, obviously. And this is a bit of contention. I mean, they've sort of reconciled this because Revenge of the Cybermen, again, when all these things take place is always a matter of debate. But like they've Revenge is supposed to be around the 30th century. Mm-hmm. So they are researching something that hasn't happened yet, which is, you really got a headcanon that one. Like somehow they've got access to future information. Now, I will say that the proper Cyberman story that follows this one could provide an out for that, right? Because in Attack of the Cybermen, if you remember, they have a time ship that they have captured.
Yes.
So you could say, well, maybe they captured that even prior to Earthshock, and they've been doing some time travel stuff in the meantime. And so maybe they sort of know a little bit about their own future, and they're trying to change that here. I don't know. It's a lot of headcanon, but it does do this kind of thing.
The Lost Time War, right? The Lost Cyber Time Lord Time War.
Yeah,
Like,
totally.
the ship comes from that, the awareness of their future, like they're not even thinking about it. But yeah, they appear to know that the Doctor can regenerate. They appear to know a lot about Time Lords, that they can change their face.
Yes. And well, that makes sense because it's the Doctor and the Doctor and the Doctor. So I like this idea that cyber history is kind of recorded and centralized somewhere. And the Cybermen can access it, but whether you're a leader or some other regular soldier, you have different levels of access. Honestly, I know this is headcanon, but this is all really implied by everything they're sort of doing here. Because the leader seems to know stuff that the others don't. So he has some sort of security clearance that lets him know all this stuff about the Doctor and TARDISes. How they know the TARDIS only requires one person to fly it, I don't know. But again, there's been so many adventures, and you could argue later ones where they might have found that out. I'm not really sure. Maybe Silver Nemesis could have like given him that clue. And there's obviously like supposition and they're putting things together. There is a Big Finish audio adventure that plays this up too. There's a oh god, I forget what it was called, but it's the one with Perry and the Sixth Doctor, and she goes back to Baltimore to her home, and the Cybermen are a threat there, and they immediately recognize the Doctor and Perry. It's like, oh yeah, they're in our files. And there's actually a discussion like, how do they know who you are? Well, we've met them a couple times. And so they recognize Perry as a threat and stuff. So it kind of like makes sense. There's this centralized Cyberman knowledge, and it sort of helps you justify pulling out cool clips from whatever you want.
Yeah, there's actually a cyber LLM, and they're using cyber AI that has like detected this. Hey, this guy keeps calling himself a doctor, and look, there's a TARDIS present in the background of every one of those things, and maybe this is just the AI hallucinating when it says it takes one person to operate the TARDIS. It's just guessing.
Yeah. So I'd love to go over some of the plot holes. We've done a few of them. I don't want to go too many of them. Like, honestly, we do our notes in our newsletter. By the way, I'll get the plug of the newsletter out now at pulltoopen.net. We do a newsletter, and I've got a bunch of plot holes in my notes. But I wanted to highlight one in particular because it's the one that really sticks out to me, having seen this multiple times. So there's a period... like basically, the captain is refusing to stop the freighter because they'd be stopped, because then she'd be essentially giving up her bonus and everyone's bonus because of the security alert. So they don't do it. Fair enough. She doesn't really know what's going on. Then the Cybermen come out, and the Doctor says there's a bunch of them. Don't think they're going to be easy to handle. Ringway keeps them prisoner for a bit, so it makes sense that they can't do anything. But for a brief period, they'd subdue Ringway, and the Cybermen haven't taken control. They haven't taken control of the freighter yet. They're outside the bulkheads. So there's this brief period where they actually still have control of the ship, and the Cybermen don't. Why not stop the ship right then and there? That's the thing that is like all the other ones I can sort of headcanon away. That one I just like, what? All I can think of is like the Cybermen either jammed controls somehow and they couldn't do it, and it's never mentioned. Otherwise, why not do either radio the Earth or whatever? Like that's a big one for me.
So I have a similar problem also to do with the freighter and this sense of security. And we're told at the start, when we first meet the freighter crew, two things that just sort of don't make sense together. First of all, there are 3 crew members missing. Right. Secondly, the captain has just been basically interrogated for 7 hours on a space station. I don't know if they call space stations in space, but I'll draw a veil over that one. So Earth security, which is really tight because of this conference, has just completely skipped over the fact that 3 people are missing on this freighter. That nobody.
Well, she just hadn't told anyone. She hasn't put it in her log because she wants to get home early and get her bonus.
You'd think that they would want the IDs of everyone that's on board.
I don't think that's necessarily a hole. I think it is a weird choice. It's like in the real world, you would never make that choice. You would be like, well, wait a minute. Like, we're talking about missing people. Like, that doesn't just happen, especially because it's space, right? Like, where would they go? And it explains why they do security patrols on the freighter, because that on its surface doesn't make any sense because you're in space. Like, what are you securing from exactly? I guess maybe you could argue sometimes stowaways are a problem on a freighter, but I think the security protocols are only there because of the missing crew members. So they think they have a stowaway or something. But if so, you would think they'd be much more tense about it. And you think the crew would be actively petitioning the captain to, do something about, like, tell her security. Like, there's a problem. Like, people don't just get lost on a freighter and you don't know where they are. Like, what are you talking about?
1 missing crew member I can buy. 2 looks like carelessness. 3, everyone would be in a panic.
Yeah.
Constantly. And I just don't get why did you have to make them 3? You just make them 1 and still everything works a lot better. So it just sort of, it's a lack of care and attention. And then it sort of feels like it's a setup for the end of episode 3 cliffhanger, end of episode 2 cliffhanger, I guess, where the Doctor and Adric are basically arrested at gunpoint, and the crew member says, "On this ship, we execute murderers." Well, are you doing it by the book or aren't you? Is it like, what is the normal regulation to happen here? Like, do you take murderers in for trial? Do you So again, it's just sort of like not giving us quite enough information to
they're almost behaving like there's no central authority, except there is, because they keep saying Earth's on red alert, and there's clearly a central authority here. So it's again, like it falls apart on scrutiny, but you're kind of like, okay, we need to sort of have this tense situation and get on to the next thing, and you don't spend too much time on it. There's a bunch of those. There's a few others, like a lot of people sometimes criticize, well, how did the Cybermen even get in these silos in the first place? And they're just on the freighter, and like that's pretty convenient, and it is. But it is also like I don't see that as a plot hole. It's like, well, it's a whole story that's missing, right? And you can sort of imagine pretty easily, like, Ringway isn't the only person they've bribed or bamboozled to essentially set up this whole scenario. So there's kind of a whole other movie that clearly happens before this movie to get the Cybermen in place, which would be a pretty cool thing to do in other media, to be honest with you.
It would, but I mean, what we're left with here is, I don't know, we'll get to talking about if the evil plot had succeeded, but it is one of the most convoluted and hard to understand plots I think we've come across. So the Cybermen have buried this, or the Cybermen's androids that they took from this freighter have buried a bomb in some caves, and they're activating the bomb basically by galactic Wi-Fi, but somehow it's getting through to the caves. Like, that's really not been thought out. Like, there should really be a point where the cyber underling is telling the cyber leader, "Oh, damn it, I can't get a signal. Like, we've got 1 bar of service down those caves."
Yeah, I honestly kept thinking as that sequence is going on, you would have a progress bar now. Like, this is before we had progress bars. This was 1982.
I know. Maybe that's what the cyber leader is all about. Immediately, at once.
I can't see it. I don't know what's going on.
Upgrade the Wi-Fi.
So again, a whole other movie that has to happen for that bomb to even get planted. And again, I think you're correct that I don't think the Cybermen actually went. I think it was either the androids or some other person they bribed, etc. Again, it's all very convenient. The other thing that I sometimes think about is that why do the android weapons disintegrate people and the cyber weapons don't? You know, like it's almost like those are more effective. So again, you could
turn people into like cool goo. The cool multicolored goo that the android victims turn into.
Which was, again, I'd say good for episode 1 in that it sort of sets this sort of gruesome, dark tone right away. And I could see them wanting to pull back from that so that they're not necessarily walking through goo for the rest of the show. That said, they do walk through a lot of bodies that are sort of strewn about once the crew gets slaughtered by the Cybermen. And by the way, the Cybermen are rather wasteful in this story. I got to say, that's one of the things I kind of don't like about it as a fan of the Cybermen, in that it's, the Cybermen look great, they're plotting, and there's a lot of cool tension and dialogue, but there isn't that essence of conversion, that thing that they finally brought back in Attack of the Cybermen. Like, why aren't you turning these people into Cybermen and adding that layer to it? And they don't really do that. Again, they have the whole thing with the chins and making them having hints of them being human and more than robots, which is good. But when you can get conversion in there too, it always makes it even more epic.
Another thing they don't explain, but is I was so grateful to see was explained in the Target novelization somewhat. By the way, shout out to Ian Marta for doing that novelization. Good old Harry Sullivan, not an imbecile when it comes to turning cyber stories into novels. But when it's never explained why the Cybermen are putting the bomb in the caves and what kind of bomb it is. The Doctor just says this thing about the survivors will envy the dead, like that's how big a deal of a bomb it is. Well, okay, but what does that mean?
Right.
What is explained in the novelization is that this has been placed in caves because it's some sort of key pressure point of the tectonic plates. So it's basically going to destroy the Earth that way.
I'll buy that.
Yeah,
Sure. I mean, we
so
saw
it works.
Inferno, and we have seen in Revenge of the Cybermen, they had those bombs that were supposed to crack Voga apart, although when they set them off, they don't do much at all, other than kill the Cybermen that are in that cavern. So anyway, I it's not too much of a stretch for me to think, it's just a planet-destroying bomb. Again, not too much flattering for Earth security in this particular episode. But yeah, you kind of you have to sort of squint a bit and again make up a lot of things that sort of set up the story.
And
to
also
have
the underling is like complaining that it's like we're setting off the bomb too soon. Again, chill, cyber leader, basically.
Well, I guess like not all the Earth leaders or the galactic leaders are present yet, I assume. So this is something worth talking about because honestly, this is probably worse in terms of the overall story.
Mm-hmm.
The fact that the Cybermen are thinking, hey, all these galactic leaders are here that are going to form a military alliance against us. Let's just take them all out in one blow. And they think that's smart. Where you kind of go like, well, wait a minute. Would that not simply emphasize the threat that we pose?
Right.
And then they would absolutely go to war. Like, I mean, like any doubt they would have would be like, oh, wow, like we really got to take out the Cybermen because they are doing really bad things.
Yeah,
I think
Eric Saywood may have just sort of been thinking of like the peace conference in Day of the Daleks, perhaps, and sort of wanting to incorporate something like that. But yeah, you never see it. Like it's barely mentioned. Like just have a radio news item on the freighter or something, or just I don't know, a quick shot of delegates arriving, something to make us realize that there is a peace conference. But yes, you are bang on the nose by saying like that would the line is destroy the conference and you destroy the unity. Really? No, I think you create unity.
Again, it's another draft would have maybe fixed it. It could destroy the unity only if you blame it on someone else.
Mm-hmm.
You know, if you can sort of sell it that like, oh, the Alpha Centauri or whoever did this.
Yes.
You know, not us.
Oh my goodness, that must have been the Daleks. You guys should go after them. They're really nasty. But yeah, I mean, it's also I really don't get it. I really don't get how it's supposed to work. But okay, they and they also understand the concept of a scapegoat. They understand, like they're suggesting to Ringway, to their traitor, like go into the ship, you'll find a scapegoat. So you get that concept. So to your point, like they could have invented a scapegoat for the conference to attack.
Yeah, it's true. Yeah. I think there's a version of this that you could polish even more. But again, it is just filling in a lot of this sort of background stuff that honestly, at the end of the day, I don't think really matters so much in terms of whether this story succeeds or not. Like I do think, on its own terms, the story succeeds really, really well. And it's really like, again, it's more about atmosphere. It's about all the back and forth between the cyber leader and the Doctor. And then, of course, all the lead in to Adric's demise at the end, which is foreshadowed in certainly episode 1. I mean, you're certainly noticing Matthew Waterhouse is getting a lot of screen time. He and Tegan end up getting the most screen time. Poor Nyssa is confined to the TARDIS for the last couple of episodes, and this is the symptom of the crowded TARDIS at the time. But I will say this, like all of the Adric stuff it's fine. The sort of goodbye scene is good because they kind of have that little theme. Shakes his hand, and he says to Tegan, "I'll see you soon." And I was watching this with Grace, and she had this great line. She said, "That's the most I won't see you soon. I'll see you soon I've ever heard." Like it's like, yep, pretty much.
Adric is pretty good at those, but yeah, he it's interesting. Well, there is one other thing we should talk about, but I do want to mention, by the way, I don't know if you heard the commentary on the DVD of this.
Oh yeah, the cast commentary.
The cast commentary. Apparently, poor Matthew Waterhouse. The name that they gave him on the set was Matt Finish.
And Janet Fielding, I think, said that, but she also called him Boom Boom Waterhouse. Yeah. She had a couple of funny nicknames for him.
Oh, poor Matthew. Yeah, like they don't even have a respectful moment of silence on the commentary when he dies. But we should also talk, like, a lot of the problems are nitpicking. You're absolutely right about that. But we really do have to talk about we talked about the supposed temporal state of grace in the TARDIS before. We talked about that with Invasion of Time. Supposedly you can't like draw weapons in the TARDIS or whatever. Like this is contradicted several times throughout history. But oh my God, is it contradicted here? And I feel like we've discussed this before. The video, the great YouTube video, look it up if you haven't seen it. The Doctor is going to bust a cap in your ass, where we see all of the times that the Doctor is handling weapons in contravention of what he usually says about handling guns and weapons. And a lot of it is drawn from Earthshock. And he's really doing that here with the gun, like right in the heart of the cyber leader, all of that. Like it's pretty violent.
Picture on the novelization is Davison kneeling down with one of the blasters where and this shot actually never happens in the show. You see him from behind when the Cybermen are about to walk on the bridge, but they close the bulkhead. But you see him, he's pointing the gun with clearly the intention to shoot the Cybermen. Now, this is not entirely out of character for the Doctor. It is rare that he gets this violent, but I mean, you think back to when we did Day of the Daleks and Pertwee was blasting away at those Ogrons, which you could argue possibly worse, even though they're both sort of living things. The Cyberman is a little more sort of metallic and anonymous.
But usually he has the good sense to not bring his kills home. Don't kill these creatures in front of the missus. She likes to think she's in a temporal state of grace.
True. And there's like a bit where, so the end is really epic, where the cyber leader crushes the communicator. He announces he's going to kill the Doctor, takes a second so that Tegan could jump him from behind. By the way, Janet Fielding says this on the commentary. I don't know if it was intended, but they all go like, well, why does the cyber leader feel anything? Because like Tegan does something. Why doesn't he just toss her aside? And she says, well, I've got a gold ring. So supposedly that's basically, I think Janet Fielding's bringing her own headcanon to that scene.
Oh yeah.
So anyway, he tosses her aside, and then he does the badge, and then he blows him away. So he chooses violence again. They situationally, like, what else are you going to do? But it is one of those things of Seward, JNT, this whole era. And to your point about the original sin, I think that sort of extended forward a bit, particularly in Attack of the Cybermen, when essentially Seward wrote it again, and basically it seemed like he tried to top himself in terms of like how violent this thing could get. Like I say,
80s, but not really.
Well, again, like it depends on your taste, certainly, but it is like, okay, Doctor Who's been this. Let's inject some of these elements and see how it goes. And I think in this episode it kind of succeeds, but I mean, I think most folks think this probably should have been the limit of it.
Yeah. I think you're right that Attack of the Cybermen is the high water mark, but
beyond the high water mark, that's like the levees broke in Attack of the Cybermen. One thing I wanted to say, just as I was sort of talking about how I think the Adric scenes work, and he clearly Matthew Waterhouse knows he's on the way out and is sort of trying to give his best performance. But actually, I think this ends up being a better Tegan episode.
Yeah.
I think Tegan's great. Exactly. She has basically her best line in the whole series. when she is in the cargo hold and she just goes, "Yeah, I'm just a mouth on legs." Like, what was I thinking coming out here?
Don't put yourself down, Tegan. We know you're an excellent artist, and you can fly a TARDIS. We know this from Force Doomsday. Like you learned how to fly a TARDIS while crying. And I've got to say, so again, part of the confusion of the plot and everything moving so fast, but the freighter moves back in time 65 million years because the TARDIS is somehow controlling it, and because Tegan's mashed a bunch of buttons and she doesn't know what she's doing.
No, the freighter moves back in time because of the Cybermen's thing, its device controlling the freighter. So basically, Adric's freeing the logic codes, and then it screws something up with whatever's going on with the warp drive because the Cybermen thing is controlling it. So it starts going back in time.
Okay, so the Cybermen do know they're traveling in time. This isn't. I was about to lay the.
They weren't trying to. The Cybermen's device isn't a time travel device. It's just some weird effect of having this device trying to control your thing when it's in warp drive. So they might have invented time travel right here.
I mean, the Cyberlet is super obsessed with time. If he figures out a way to move in it.
Yeah, again, it's fine to nitpick. It's also like I was nitpicking Horror of Fang Rock for turning a lighthouse into a laser cannon. It's like, yeah, I mean, Doctor Who just does this, right? You know what I mean? Like, it's like, okay, we need the Traitor to go back in time. There's kind of an X factor here of the Cybermen's device. You could argue even the power drain, because the Cybermen that are revived by accident towards the end, maybe that also had something to do with it. So there's all these sort of factors. Like, yeah, it goes back in time. Why not?
Yeah, sure. Why not? Why not? Indeed.
All right. That answers.
Speaking of time.
We must get to something immediately, and that thing is the 4 questions to Doomsday. First question is excellent. No, it is, why did the randomizer take us here?
Well, I think the theme of sacrifice and the theme of one person needing to be sacrificed so that the whole of the human race can live is the thing that unites Earthshock with Father's Day. The randomizer has been looking at companions a lot recently.
I see, yeah.
And a kind of at fixed points in time, as it were. I mean, Father's Day was that. This sort of feels a little fixed point in timey, both in the sense of our rating of like this is a moment of such overwhelming nostalgia, it's hard to rate, but also in the sense of like this is. I mean, is it even explicitly said at some point that this is a fixed point in time, so the Doctor can't save Adric? He can't go back and save Adric because it's somehow fixed? Because he wasn't.
I don't think they ever say that, but there's a lot implied in the next episode in Time Flight where it's, we can't do anything. And he's concerned about also preventing the freighter from crashing into Earth. But Tegan even sort of has a good retort. Like, look, the freighter can still crash into Earth. That's okay. Yeah. Let's just save Adric. Absolutely. And he doesn't do it. I think because he's basically abiding by the laws of time, whatever those may be at this point.
Yeah, the randomizer does love Adric, has to be said. We've done quite a few Adric things, and it's kind of nice for the 3 people who remember Full Circle at this point to see that the thing he's clutching at the end as he dies is his brother's belt. Yeah,
the badge, like it's their badge. That's sort of the line from Full Circle where. He says, you've got a badge for mathematical excellence, and then Vosh holds up the rope, right, or whatever it is. It's like, this is our badge, and you have to earn it. Right. And he earned it, apparently.
He did earn it, so that's a nice payoff for anyone who was paying attention from, I guess, the previous season.
Yeah. It's the previous season. Doctor has a lot of fans. There was actually a lot of viewers for this one, so... funnily enough, even though there was an epic reveal to Cybermen at the end of episode 1, there was slightly fewer for episode 2. So I think it was 9.1 and it went down to 8.8. But then episode 3 got pretty close to 10 million.
Yeah.
So people were just like, whoa. So this is back when you could get, that many people watching the same thing that wasn't some crazy world event.
Absolutely. And curiously, both BBC and the Radio Times got more complaints from parents about the plastic bag thing, the Cybermen breaking out of plastic bags, and the fear that children would imitate that, than it did about Adric's death.
Yeah. Hey, one's just a hard lesson of life. If you're picking on the Cybermen, you're probably not going to do so well.
Also, maybe it's just the TVs at the time, but you can see quite clearly there is a hole in that plastic bag right where the mouth would be. So,
Yeah, there's a few goofs, some of them are legendary if you watch the Blu-ray, that there's someone in the background in one scene doing a script if you look real close. So on the randomizer, I felt that there's something that isn't really talked about in Earthshock a lot, which is it's actually simultaneously giving you two different theories of time travel. Because in the scope of a minute or two, they go from, the Earth will be destroyed and will never exist as you have known it, to, actually, this is part of your history as you know it. And you're kind of like, oh, wow, that's cool. But you're also, as a Doctor Who fan, wait a minute, which is it? How does time travel work? Right. And as we've seen in Doctor Who, it actually kind of works both ways. They can change time, and sometimes you become part of history. And the Doctor doesn't even seem to know, right? Because he's genuinely worried about the Earth being destroyed still, and until he realizes it's 65 million years ago. So, there's not a great, I don't have a great answer to this that sorts all this out. I would just say that Father's Day was kind of trying to sort that out in a sense, right? Yeah. So it's sort of this timey-wimey, going back, changing things. What happens when you muck that up? If indeed maybe the Cybermen did create an alternate timeline, those Reapers made it come out.
So the randomizer is becoming a bit self-aware of being a time machine itself, and it wants to figure out the rules of time travel. This is a little disturbing. Yeah, maybe time to revise our catchphrase. I'm scared of the randomizer.
Do not fear the randomizer, but do fear evil. And there's evil in this story, I assume, and we're going to have to ask about it, because the next question is, what if the evil plot had succeeded? Okay. All right. So I always want to go back to the thing that doesn't quite, that's as close to the end as possible, that can turn the tables, right?
Right. And we're assuming that the evil plot is the Cybermen, not the evil plot of like Ringway to betray a ship, or the evil plot of everyone in this to just be really mean to the Doctor and his companions whenever they show up and try to help.
No, because I don't care about Ringway. Also, I feel like the emotional resonance of that is so stupid, because it's like, yes, they mention money, but they seem to play up the drama that, hey, my boss was mean to me, so I'm going to sell out the human race.
Yeah.
What?
Yeah.
That's crazy.
What's the ever-living Earth Ringway?
Yeah.
Seriously.
So I'm going to assume, if the evil plot succeeds, that the Cybermen don't do that really stupid, hey, we're just going to leave everybody here on the bridge and watch how they react. Which is like, what? Why are you executing this subtask right now on sort of observing emotions? The stakes are pretty high. You might want to stay focused, Cyber Leader.
What exactly are you observing for in terms of fear anyway? And they sort of sound like emotional connoisseurs at one point. Like, fear is the greatest of the emotions.
And it's also like just basic experiments. If they know they're being observed, they're going to behave differently. This is so flawed. It's like the worst idea that anyone Cyber Leader has ever thought of. Yeah. So he doesn't do that. He kills everybody, maybe even Adric early. And then they just go to the Doctor's TARDIS. What happens then? Scott gets to the bridge. It's abandoned. He doesn't know how to do anything. So nobody ever tries to mess around with the logic codes. It never goes back in time and destroys the Earth in the 26th century. Also, the Cybermen now have the TARDIS and the Doctor. So basically, he can control the Doctor simply by threatening his companions. So they do that. And they take him back to Telos. They get time travel. This is the Time War. This is how it starts. They did it right the first time. Yes. The Cyber Time War starts here. And that they have this war with the Time Lords. The Time Lords fix it and implant this thing in the Cyber Leader. Basically like, oh no, you want to get emotional input all the time. So maybe the first time Earthshock happens, he's not emotional, right? Maybe for whatever reason, this Cyber Leader is obsessed with emotion. It also explains why you get this crazy performance. out of Banks. And like this guy, this is a crazy emotional cyber leader that's kind of a throwback and is just obsessed with unpacking emotion. And that screws up the whole plan. Boom!
Yeah. And the original plan, I guess, we sort of end with the cyber leader just saying, excellent. Doctor Who ends, next week. Cyber leader is the show that replaces it. I love it. And every week he turns to camera and says, excellent. Just as I had foreseen. And then the BBC is able to sue Matt Groening when The Simpsons comes out. Like, that's clearly a catchphrase.
There we go.
Yeah.
The BBC is like embarrassingly rich after this. Doctor Who's budget just goes cranked to the max, and they never have to do the Disney deal.
Wow, we've never done evil plot
Not
succeeding.
me, Chris. I did all these alternate timelines.
It's yes, exactly. We're the timelines are out of control, man. We gotta bring them back. We gotta bring them back.
You're welcome
with
listeners.
The third question.
The third question. Oh, you don't have one of these? All right.
We're gonna go. I was going to say that if the evil plot succeeds, the Cybermen destroy the conference, essentially. Yeah. And then the entire galaxy binds together to eradicate them once and for all. Because I didn't also consider that they would have a time machine out of the deal.
Yeah. So they would turn the tables again. And realize how dumb they are. All right. So we're moving on to the third question, which is, where is the Clara Splinter? Clara Oswald, of course, splintered in time at the end of The Name of the Doctor. She's somewhere in every single Doctor Who story. Where is she in Earthshock?
Doing overtime, I think, to fill in all of these plot holes that we mentioned.
No kidding.
But I'm really taken with what you were talking about with the Time Lords. Basically building in emotion into the cyber leader so that the evil plot doesn't succeed. Clearly that's got to be Time Lady Clara, right? I mean, she's definitely hanging around the TARDIS at this point because we talked about her helping Tegan to fly the TARDIS. Maybe she's advising Tegan on when to hit the controls here to kind of throw a wrench in the plans. But yeah, maybe she is. I do hate it when Clara is just like the ex-girlfriend of a character, but maybe she's the cyber leader's ex-girlfriend and he's just obsessed with emotion now because she was like, you are too emotionless. We need more emotion in our relationship. You need to go to therapy. And he's like, what is emotion? I must study emotion. And then
wow, cyber leader's a jilted ex,
right?
Clara.
She also maybe gets the cyber leader hooked on cocaine because I gotta say, early 80s, a lot of it about, and also like the way he's acting, like he's very impatient all the time. We were talking about he wants this to happen immediately. It's like he's kind of acting like a kind of, coked up, Daisy's CEO, right? So
you're making me like they're always bending over that console, like in the lieutenant walks in, leader. He's like, do not interrupt me.
Exactly. That's why it's so low. So it's just out of camera shot whenever they need to do a bump. But yeah, apparently there's one kind of powder that does get through their air vents. Don't cut it with gold. Yeah, so that would explain it. She's the cyber dealer.
I gotta say, this is the one time the gold weakness was actually used well.
Yes.
Because in Revenge, we talked about that when we did it for the podcast. It's interesting, but they don't even use it in the story that they're telling, which is kind of silly. Mm-hmm. And then when they do it in Silver Nemesis, we haven't done that one yet, but one of the things is it's like coins and arrows, and it becomes this thing where it's like kryptonite, right? Like it just can do anything. Just get it away from them, otherwise, and they'll just keel over. And if there's a gold bar anywhere near them or something,
or just the edge of a badge.
Yeah, subtle. It sort of believably gives the Doctor the edge in that final struggle. Mm-hmm. It worked. So for my candidate of where Clara is, I thought there's so many holes to cover up, but I chose this one, and it's that she's actually a converted Cyberman. She is the Cyber Lieutenant.
Oh.
So Clara was converted to the Cyber Lieutenant, which is why the Lieutenant is so incompetent and just can't do anything that right. He can't even put the safety on the switch at the end to ensure that the Cybermen don't keep getting reactivated, which that happens because the story needs some more Cybermen. So it's like this accidentally happened. So that's my explanation. Clara is actually sort of fighting the cyber conversion, being dumb and screwing up the Cybermen's plan. So the Doctor can defeat them through the time travel crap, I guess.
But she's also going around to all those plastic bags on the Cybermen, making sure to cut little holes. So they don't suffocate, because she wouldn't want any deaths on her or the Doctor's conscience.
Very thoughtful, Cyber Clara. Good job. All right, folks, it is time to move on to the final question, the only question that matters for Earthshock. What did we think of this story? The Pull to Open rating system has 7 ratings. There is the Dalek, which is what we give to a good episode of Doctor Who. The Ogron, which we give to an irredeemably bad episode of Doctor Who. The Professor Hater, which we give to a story that isn't so great, but hey, at least they tried something. The Viscount Banger, which we reserve for the best of the best. The Fixed Point in Time, which is a story beyond rating, usually for reasons of nostalgia. The Lady Cassandra, which is a paper-thin plot, but hey, at least it looks good. Or a Zarbi, a story that is so bad, it's good.
So, for Earthshock, I really, because I remember so distinctly watching this at the time, I wanted to go back to my diary, which I was quite precocious in my diaries. I did keep one in 1982. It did not. It was sad to see that it didn't rate a mention either on the original time it was broadcast or the repeat. Is
because you were so stunned.
I was so stunned, but even and to be fair, like I wasn't really into giving lots of details on what happened on important episodes of Doctor Who, because what I wrote for Logopolis was on Doctor Who Regenerated. I wouldn't. I wouldn't actually name a story in my own personal 500-year diary until Warriors of the Deep in 1984. However, so it definitely struck me. It was definitely a banger at the time, is what I'm saying here. It was a Viscount banger at the time, no question. I probably would have rated it that at the time. It definitely struck me, and maybe the first, as far as I know, the first ever sort of sci-fi explanation for for a thing that wasn't, for the thing that wasn't the actual asteroid, like, sci-fi that up. So definitely banger at the time. However, I mean, I do want to also acknowledge the flaws that appear in it now, and the way that it's not aged well. I want to acknowledge that, but I also don't want to be too mean about acknowledging that. And of course, like it's so personally connected that there's definitely Fixed Point in Time vibes. So I'm giving it a hybrid rating. It is a fixed banger in time.
Oh wow, that's crazy. Have we ever done a hybrid with the Fixed Point in Time? I can't remember.
Well, actually, for Father's Day, we did a.
Did we?
I did a Fixed Hater in Time.
Oh, that's right. Yeah. Oh man, that was so recent. I almost, it's almost inaccessible to me.
Right.
That's amazing. Look at you.
Right. I mean, and maybe sort of the randomizer is like looking at the reverse flow time, like reverse engineering. Like, I want to give you all your Fixed Point in Time ratings or semi ratings, right? So. Yeah, so we had a line of Professor Haters last time lining up to throw themselves in front of cars. Here we have a fixed banger in time. The Viscount is just sort of, they're trapped in some sort of cyber conversion machine.
Sure, that makes a lot of sense. And honestly, I got to say, I basically was there with you up until I was sort of watching the end of this one and then sort of really thinking about my rating. Because honestly, like for me, I don't see almost how I couldn't rate this a Fixed Point in Time. It was so seminal to me. Like it was just formative, honestly, in me as a Doctor Who fan. Like I don't think I would be as into the show if I hadn't seen Earthshock early in my sort of Doctor Who fandom. It just transcended so many different things. So it was that meaningful. It's hard to be like unbiased, although I don't think being unbiased in a sort of thinking about these shows is really my goal here. So here's what's influencing me though. And it's, again, I'm going to full disclosure, like my daughter influences me a lot because I see the show through her eyes, because she's seen a lot of these for the first time. Right. And I got to say, everything that hit me also hit her. Probably a little less, just because I think Doctor Who matters a little less to her than it did for me. She's got a lot more going on in her life than I did when I was like 10 or 11 years old. But the end of the first episode, she was like, whoa, that was interesting. Like when the Cybermen came out, she loved all the Adric stuff because she really likes Adric, and she her he's in the episode a lot, obviously. And when he says he's hungry, he declares his hunger in the second episode, which she really liked. And again, I know I'm not putting too much on Grace, because I honestly think, as I thought about that, why is this working for her? Why is this still work? Why is it still pulling it off? And it is because it's Doctor Who's equivalent of the summer blockbuster. It really is. And every blockbuster has plot holes. Every blockbuster has mistakes. It's never as good as when you take that carnival ride the first time. You want to keep having it, though. But I think I'm not going to hold that against it. Like, it really delivers. And if you're a Doctor Who fan, yes, this is a must watch. And so I'm unapologetically giving this a banger. Even though I went into this whole watch and review thinking I would give it a fixed point in time. No, it really delivers. Earthshock, one of the best, all the way.
I kind of figured you would be full on banger. That's where I predicted you would land. By the way, what was Grace's reaction to Adric's death?
She kept hitting my arm, saying no, 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 no. She had a physical reaction to him dying. She could see it coming. She was like, oh no, what's going on? Like, why is he there? Why is he on the bridge? Why isn't he with everyone? She was just like, she was not happy when Adric was taken out.
We were texting, you just watched episode 3, I think, and I was like, oh boy. Yeah. I wonder how that's going to go down. Yeah, I watched it with my ex, who I watched a lot of Doctor Who with, and she didn't know what happened here. Kind of started to suspect, but it did still come as a surprise. So yeah, it definitely has that power.
It's almost like the worst moment comes earlier. It's not quite the death. It's like when he walks out of the elevator.
Yeah.
Because he was so close, he could have made it. And then he walks out and you're just like, you're pulling your hair out. What? And it's a shame there's that final bit where he's typing, and clearly Matthew Waterhouse knows this thing's going to blow up, because he's like, it's the most full arm's length, double finger typing. Like, is it going to blow? Is it going to blow? And then it blows up, and it's like, okay, maybe we could have shot that again.
By the way, I would love to see a version where it's like a post 42 version where it's not logic problems that you need to disarm the bomb, but pub quiz questions. Adric's just being stumped on like who has more number ones, the Beatles or Elvis.
Why would you want to take a cock's tail into a bath? All right, folks, that's a question you guys can ponder as you rate Earthshock. Hey, is it a banger? Is it a fixed point in time? It could be a Dalek or an Ogron or whatever other rating you think it deserves. You can now go into your Spotify app, pull up from the bottom of the screen, and rate it, and we will report those findings in aggregate in a future episode of Pull to Open.
All right, well, it's time. It's time for Pull to Open to step into its own time machine, which, if the Cybermen have told you it only takes one person to operate our randomizer, they are lying. They are hallucinating. They have been misled. It takes two, baby. It takes two.
That's right. Takes two. I'm in possession of one half of the randomizer, and that is the Pull to Open Codex. Link in the show notes. It is a spreadsheet of every single story in Doctor Who in sequential order.
Weird.
And we have done quite a few of these. So I'm going to mark off Earthshock, and we are going to choose, or the randomizer will choose, excuse me.
Yeah,
from 174 different stories.
174. All right. Well, pausing only to brush the gold dust off my shoulders, I step towards the other part of the randomizer controls, which is random.org, which, by the way, has one of those Cloudflare making sure you're human checks before you go there, which I like to think is so that Cybermen do not get hold of randomness technology. Because it's obviously the missing component for their time machine. But I enter 1 and 174, and random.org will use atmospheric noise and the amount of gold dust in the atmosphere and bits of iridium left over from the asteroid impact to give us a truly random number instead of a guess at a random number, which is what most algorithms and LLMs do. So before I hit and generate and get a number between 1 and 174, we'd like to get down on our knees and beg the randomizer for forgiveness, because the randomizer loves to observe our emotions. So Pete, what emotion would you like to display for the randomizer?
Emotions. Well, I like, when I tease the randomizer with my preferences, I often like to do opposite things or follow on the themes of the story we just did. I instead would like to point the randomizer to a bingo card, and that is dinosaur bingo. I would love to start filling in that card even more. We've done a bunch, we've done dinosaurs on a spaceship. And I don't know, there's probably other episodes of dinosaurs showed up, and then we've done Mark of the Rani. There's some T-Rexes in that. So, but there's quite a few others.
George of the World.
Yeah, George of the World.
List.
Well, actually, that's in that we've done the hot take, but it could be one of these, right? So let's get a story that in some way features dinosaurs, or they matter to the story in some way. Maybe they're just talked about, but.
All right.
Start filling in dinosaur bingo.
Your request is for dinosaurs. My request is for emotions, because I would love to please any Cybermen who are in the audience. Big shout out to if you've recently been converted and you still listen to Pull to Open. Good job, guys. Be sure to spread it around the rest of the cyber fleet. But we've learned from Earthshock, Cybermen like to study emotions. So take us, randomizer, to the most emotional story in the entire history of Doctor Who, whatever you judge it to be.
All right.
Most emotion rich. And I'm guessing that might be New Who.
Might be. All right. Are you ready for the countdown?
Ready for the countdown. Bring it on. But I would like you to do it in the voice of the cyber assistant who keeps saying, 30 seconds, 1 minute until the bomb goes off.
Oh, I was doing that while you were doing the TLDW. You probably didn't catch that.
I was barreling ahead like the captain of a freighter. I wanted my bonus.
Codex engaged. Execute in 4, 3, 2, 1.
38. It's
38 early on.
New Who.
It might be dinosaurs though. Let me see. 38 is the Sontaran experiment.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
It's back to the Sontaran bingo card then.
Yeah, on the season 12 bingo card. Oh, it doesn't fill it in. It's getting close. This is good. All right. We were at the Time Warrior fairly recently, so it's sort of doing Sontarans in order if you don't count. Well, don't forget we did Rutens recently. So
we did Rutens.
There we go.
We were rooting for the Rutens, and the randomizer is not rooting for the Rutens. It's rooting for the Sontarans. Got it.
You got it. And you got it, dear listener. You got your podcast app tuned to Pull to Open. But if you don't, please give us a follow or a subscribe, because that's what podcasts are good for. Thanks so much for listening. If you have not subscribed, please do so. And we are, of course, available on all the podcast places as well as YouTube. But the absolute best thing you can do to support the podcast is share it with a friend, even if they are emotionless. Martin West, thanks for this music. It's always rocking. And follow us on the socials, Pull to Open 63. And we'll do some experimenting with you next time.
Well, late breaking news on the Sontaran experiment. We will be doing this on the roughly around the 50th anniversary of its broadcast.
Oh my!
It was February to March 1975.
So, man, all right.
I know that all out there, you were probably prepared for your 50th anniversary of the Sontaran experiment party already. But if you haven't, send out the invites, invite Pull to Open, and we will see you there.
Oh boy, you got your fixed point in time ready. See you there, folks.